All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, TCM community. It is Mike and Hokie here to go through our, I would say annual, though it doesn't always quite end up being annual, or every now and again, um, preview. We're doing a season preview tonight, catch on a couple of the little minor topics, and kind of go through that as it is. So, for those of us who haven't listened to one of these podcasts before, we start in the American League, work our way through each division, just kind of give a brief rundown of how we think those divisions are going to go, teams in there, weaknesses, strengths, how we think they're going to fan out. Do that for the American League and the National League. Then we'll do some way too early playoff predictions. And eventually tell you who's going to win the World Series. Here's a hint: we're never right, but that doesn't stop us from guessing anyway. So that is going to be our rundown for this evening. So if anybody's in the chat, which I believe there's only one of you, then feel free to ask questions. We will absolutely ignore them and not answer a single thing. So as I said, we will start in my division, which is the American League East. And
Yes.
yes.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll let you go last since you're in the East. And
yes.
I'm definitely going to have to say, I think New York went all the way to the World Series this year. They didn't really lose a lot of players. If anything, some of their pieces are starting to grow a little bit more. Nomar hopefully can get another jump in New York. But they do also have a payroll or a projected profit of 121 million. So I feel like they are going to win the division. I do think Baltimore has the pieces, and he just needs to find a way to piece it together. But unfortunately, the way that I'm going to look at it, I think it's going to be New York, Boston, Tampa, then Baltimore. I think GD's got the pieces. He just needs to find something to do. But I'll say this, Mike: your team just doesn't like to lose, and once again, I'm sure you're going to have some type of weird season where you lose 10 in a row and then you turn around and win 15, and then you will not know what route you're going.
I know which route I want to go, and for those of you who listen to this podcast, please help me by taking my players. Like, please, I want to rebuild. I've wanted to rebuild for a decade now, and the AL East won't let me. It's like every time MZ says he's going to rebuild, it's like, no, here's a semi-decent winning season and a playoff berth. I don't want to go to the playoffs. I want to go to the first overall pick and just, start rebuilding this team. It's a mess. I didn't even spend money in free agency this year. Normally, I'd go out there and just spend $1 billion in free agency and just keep the float going because y'all won't let me rebuild. No, I didn't even do that this year. You have to let me rebuild. For the love of God, please. Please. And that being said, all of you that come at me and you're like, oh, give me Andy Van Slyke, give me Mark McGwire, stop it. I'm not giving you my named young players. I'm removing all the other good players. I have other good players. For the love of God, just take them. Please, for the love of God, take them and let me move on. Half the guys I released in free agency went somewhere else. Only half. It would have been much better if it had been all of them. Again, for the love of God, just help me help you. But as far as the East goes, New York's the clear favorite for obvious reasons. They just a team that I would love to see die, but they just won't. At New York, I think Tampa Bay has got a good shot at the playoffs. They're a solid squad, and if you all just let me rebuild, for the love of God, they will be a solid squad. And then me, and then Baltimore. I mean, I think that's just the way that's probably going to pan out logistically. If we're lucky, it won't. If we're lucky, I go to the bottom of the division where I belong and finally start a rebuild process. But who knows? Y'all won't trade with me anymore, so or you never did. So there's that too. But we'll see. I think it's New York's division to lose, and I don't see them losing it. Moving on to the AL Central. In the AL Central, I think it's a two-team race. I think Detroit and Cleveland are going to kind of duke it out. I think that Cleveland has the better lineup, but Detroit has the better pitching staff. So I think it's going to be kind of a back and forth between those two teams to see kind of who takes the crown, who ekes it out. I'm not sure if the loser makes the playoffs. I'm going to guess they don't, honestly. I think whichever one of those two teams comes out on top makes the playoffs, and the other one just is outside looking in. And the other two teams in the division, I mean, Chicago, I'm guessing, is full rebuild. And Toronto, I know, is trying to Manny's trying to rebuild too. He moved Vlad, I believe, and he's trying to move other pieces. So Toronto is going to be slipping down, but I think Chicago's already down. So if I had to take a guess, I'm probably going to say batting wins goes Cleveland, then Detroit, then Chicago, and then, or I'm sorry, Toronto, then Chicago. Unless Toronto can move more pieces, they will finish third in the division with Chicago coming out in the bottom.
Yeah, I definitely see Cleveland winning the division. It's interesting to see Herbert Cole just continually to pitch better. I didn't actually anticipate him to pitch better in Cleveland, and he's on pace to potentially get 200 wins, which is pretty neat to see. There's a couple bullpen pieces that I think Andrew needs to do. Um, so it would be great if in the offseason he ever put in bids, because every offseason I always sign a couple guys for him so he doesn't have like a 53 overall player playing there. But he's got Cal Ripken, he's got Veritek, he's got Ruth, he's got Vaughn Jr. I mean, his team was basically non-existent for like the first 10 years of this league. It's nice to finally see the team kind of going somewhere. Then you have, next up has to be Detroit, just based on the fact that Eric doesn't really ever go out fully tanking. But Toronto's definitely rebuilding, and Chicago just has nothing. Obviously, we now have a good GM there with Nate, but that team barely was going to hit 50 wins last year, and I really do think they're going to finish the bottom of the division. I don't think Toronto has the capability to lose more games than Chicago, especially with Freudis Nova, who's probably going to hit another 30, 40 home runs. Like, he has gone to compensation twice for Manny and been returned both times, and there is no reason that he's been returned, other than the fact that he has 70 contact. But like, he had 42 home runs, then 28, then 48. So I think teams kind of missed out, and he may only hit like 200, but sometimes those are the type of players. So Manny, I'm trying to help you out here. Give you some names so that maybe someone approaches you for Nova. But basically, I'm going to say Cleveland, Detroit, Toronto, and then Chicago to finish that division. And I'll tell you one thing: I don't think there's going to be a wild card team that comes out of the Central.
No, that absolutely not. So, moving on to the West, where there will be a wild card team, I can tell you that for sure. It's Oakland's team is the team to beat. I mean, in the AL in general, I think still, Ren is just dominating out there. I don't see that changing. His lineup is superior. His pitching's amazing. Good defense. Like, it's Oakland's division. There's no doubt about it. Texas is looking pretty good out there. Texas will put a run into it. But they're just not good enough to beat Oakland. They'll cruise into the first wild card spot without an issue. I like what Texas is doing well. Solid team, not an Oakland team, but a solid team. Another team out there I think to kind of watch out for is KC. KC is getting better. I think they'll make a little bit of noise out there. Again, not noise to the point they're like, oh, they're going to be a playoff team or anything like that. But I think out of that division, they're the next best. And then there's just kind of Minnesota hanging out behind the rest of them going, oh. It's one of those things. Every division has an O team. I'm trying to be that team in the East, but you all won't let me. So I think it's Oakland's division to lose, and they're just not going to do it. So
yeah, I have to say Oakland's like a no-brainer. If they go below 100 wins, that'd be a shock. I actually kind of feel like the AL in general seems weaker this season, because normally you have Toronto and yourself actually competing, and you're not, which is why I think some of the teams are going to have a little bit more of a struggle. But like, to me, when I look at the entire AL East or AL, you have 4, maybe 5 teams competing. So you have New York, you have Cleveland. I would guess Eric is competing, but he also keeps comping some of his players and didn't go out crazy. So maybe he's not. Oakland, and Texas. So basically, like those should be your four teams making the playoffs, and then it's just going to be which unlucky soul is wild card number 2, which quote unquote is going to be you. But yeah, like Kansas City, it really just kind of depends whether or not they put in some of their players. They're definitely somebody that I go through always. As people know, I hate when you have 50 overall people and like a peak of 55. So, like Jeffrey Stuckey on Kansas City is going to get free agency in that next update, just because there's so many better people available. And last year they had Stuckey in their rotation going 4-13. So yeah, that's pretty much that. But if Kansas City puts Kelly Morgan in the lineup, it maybe brings up Mays, though it might be too early. That's a team that could swing in and even get ahead of you in that second wild card. That's really the big thing. But yeah, Oakland number 1. Byron Ronzo has done a phenomenal job in Texas. Gotten a little unlucky with some players, but I think they're going to finish second, and they're probably going to be your wildcard team. And then I'm going to say Kansas City, and then Minnesota is going to be the bottom of the barrel. Just because I think Kansas City or Minnesota's got like some nice pieces like Jimmy Out and Steve and Brian Mata, but then they have actual garbage on their team. So Minnesota, I think, is going to be down there. And who's your daddy has done some great things in Minnesota, and sometimes teams, when they're doing their rebuild, just want to stop losing, and sometimes you just can't. You just need to, be terrible for a couple seasons. And then that kind of sets you into motion long term. Because the last thing you want to do is start moving pieces and adding 1 or 2 pieces, and then all of a sudden you have no more assets again. So it's good. I definitely like what Minnesota is doing, but it's just not their time anywhere close. So that basically means my picks in the AL East are going to be New York winning the division and Boston being the second wildcard team. Then I have Cleveland winning the Central. I have Oakland winning the West, with Texas being the first wildcard team. In which case, I then am going to say I think Texas beats Boston. So there you have it.
What a shock! Me making the playoffs only to lose. That doesn't sound familiar at all. I'm going to go a little bit differently. I'm going to go with the fact that people are going to listen to me and finally accept help and by taking good Boston talent. I'm going to go, obviously, New York in the East, Tampa being the wild card there. I'm going to go Cleveland in the Central. I'm going to go Oakland in the West, Texas being the other wild card. I'm going to have Texas beating Tampa Bay just to get crushed by Oakland. I'm going to have Cleveland losing to New York, and then a nice New York-Oakland ALCS, with Oakland taking it to move on to the World Series for the American League. And now that it's settled and set in stone and definitely what's going to happen, we will move on to the National League East. In the National League East, we actually have a number of teams, as we do in every league. But in this in this division, we have one good team. That is Atlanta. Atlanta, one of the best teams in the file at the moment, in a otherwise weak division. Not much competition in that division. Washington's going to be fighting for the number 1 overall pick this year. Philadelphia's going to have a solid team. They have a decent lineup and some okay pitching. But the problem is it's okay pitching in a solid lineup. It's not going to be enough to make any noise in that East, and it's not going to be enough to make the playoffs either. New York's even a step behind them, which is not good pitching at the moment. So I don't think that New York is really going to do anything. I don't think anybody's going to do anything. I mean, these guys are young teams. They're trying to up and come. In a couple more years, I think New York and Philadelphia maybe turn things around. Maybe Washington as well. But it's Atlanta. It's Atlanta and no one else. So Atlanta easily wins the NL East, with everybody else trying for that number 1 bid for the draft.
I can say, since Washington's one of the teams that are open, they are totally tanking it out, mainly because I'm controlling them and trying to make it so somebody will take them, other than NWU, who decided to message me out of the blue. But that team has literally nothing. Last year, I don't even know how they made the playoffs. They made the playoffs with like a 66 overall player in their rotation. That's why that division is just interesting. I think Philadelphia, especially with Brian Pace, he's been pitching pretty good there. It always helps when you have a high end starter, but it's definitely Atlanta's division to lose. I was surprised how quickly they exited the playoffs last year. So I'm gonna say Atlanta number one. I'm then actually gonna say Philly number two, and New York three, and Washington four. I think War Priest has done, his due diligence, kind of holding off in New York. I think when you start to see some free agency open up and they get a little active, it will be nice. But Manny Ramirez over there probably is going to be making it up very shortly in left field in New York, and maybe even next year they are in that position where they make the playoffs. But yeah, Atlanta one, Philly two, and then as I said, New York, then Washington.
Yeah, no, makes sense to me.
How does it feel to be a Boston fan and know that Manny Ramirez is on the Mets and Nomar Garciaparra is on the Yankees and Pedro Martinez is on the Dodgers? I feel like that's got to be soul crushing.
I try not to think about it because, to an extent, the Nomar one is what really hurts the most because he was definitely my favorite player growing up. Um, I Yeah, he was my favorite player growing up. I actually almost had a ball that he tossed into the stands. Actually, funny story, was actually Cal Ripken Jr.'s last game at Fenway Park. And his last at bat, he fouled a ball up the third baseline. And I was there in the box seats, and Nomar got it, and I screamed his name. He looked right at me, tossed me the ball, and literally it was in between my hands, and some asshole behind me pushed me over trying to get to the ball, um, knocked me over like 3 rows of seats. My glasses cut up my face, and the ball rolled all the way down back to the field where some little girls picked it up. I'm just like, oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. That was Cal Ripken's last foul ball at Fenway Park. To this day, it still just pisses me off. But he was my favorite player. Nomar was my favorite player. So watching him be the evil empire is a bit soul crushing at times. So it is what it is. If you'd all let me rebuild for a year 5 years ago, like I asked, some of those players would be on Boston, but you all want to fuck around. So
I'm
it is.
glad I brought up painful memories for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This stereotype of Canadians being nice is just bullshit. Anyway, moving on to the NL Central. This is a division that, again, I think has a clear favorite. That's Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's the clear favorite in that division. I mean, they've got a good lineup, they've got good pitching, and everybody else is just a couple steps behind. Pittsburgh is going to be that team flirting with a playoff spot, but not flirting with the division. And then Chicago and St. Louis are still just trying to pick themselves up and put themselves back together. There's not enough there for anything to get done. So I think Cincinnati runs away with it, with Pittsburgh making this little happy-go-lucky push that the Pirates sometimes do, both in moguls and in real life. But in the end, probably for naught. So Cincinnati clearly is just the runaway division winner there, much like Inland and the East.
So I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to say Cincinnati is obviously going to win. They did win the World Series last year for a reason. Um, they have,
because they won more games than the other team.
yeah, that's true. I mean, their rotation, being Morjan and Gore, are obviously very good. Zambrano's kind of like that hit or miss, which I mean, he didn't even win. He's 0-7 in the playoffs. So I mean, he's also got a losing record in the regular season. But yeah, Zambrano's like a decent number three. I mean, basically it's probably not far off from Zambrano's real numbers in life. He's got a really good closer though. Somebody that it'd be interesting to see if we talked about that draft and picked him out. That's one of those automated players that actually ended up being half decent. See, guys, there were a few of them, just not many. But yeah, I definitely see Cincinnati still winning the division. That rotation is arguably in competition with Oakland. It's one of the unlucky has seen to fail. Dave Wainwright, for instance, just absolute trash. So yeah, I have a feeling that St. Louis is able to just get over that hump. And the reason I say that is Pittsburgh is trying their best to be under 80 wins. Now, arguably, Pittsburgh has the better team, so I would not be surprised to see that happen. I just don't know what Raiders' plan is. His team could easily finish second, but he was really trying to lose some games, so maybe he wants to get another piece. But we'll see what happens there. And unfortunately, over there in Chicago, I am going to have to say Jason probably finishes last in the division. He had some pretty bad luck in some trades, but Joey Banks looks like a stud. And if he gets a couple more pieces, which he's not going to get in this draft anyways, because he traded his pick, then Chicago could be rolling there. But I am going to say Cincinnati wins the division, and St. Louis gets wild card spot number 2.
Number 2. All right. Well, that's a little bit different than what I had, so that's always interesting to hear. Now we go on to the most fun division, I think, in all of the league, and that is the NL West. I think this is the most competitive division. I think it is the most fun division. You got the 2 LA teams. Basically, you got the cities up by the base. It's a fun division, just point blank. And in this fun division, the team with the best lineup and the best pitching will win, and that is Los Angeles. And by Los Angeles, I mean the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers are the clear favorite to come out of this extremely competitive West, with the Angels and the Padres just kind of nipping at their heels. So, again, I think the Dodgers are the clear favorites and the easy winners here in the West. And I think the 2 wildcard teams come out of the West. I think Padres take wildcard spot 1, and then Angels take wildcard spot 2, and then the winner gets to go on and face the winner of the NL. I don't know. That's gonna be tough because you're looking at LA and Cincinnati and Atlanta. I think any of them could theoretically have the best record in the National League. You want to give Atlanta the nod just because they have to face the shittier teams more often. And Cincinnati doesn't face great teams either, but I think that the St. Louis, Chicago, Pittsburgh are better than Washington, Philadelphia, New York. So, I'm going to say that Atlanta gets the top spot. So the Angels and Padres get to duke it out to face Atlanta, while the Dodgers and Cincinnati get to have just a knockdown, drag out kind of match. So getting a little ahead of myself there, but I think that's just some very intriguing matchups and a clearly superior National.
Yeah, the NL right now seems to be the harder area to be in. I am going to say I agree with you. I think the Dodgers are going to win the division. That team is so good, and they added to it, which is the scary part. Adding Vladdy Jr. there is going to be a huge thing. It'll be interesting to see if that helps Vladdy get to 500 home runs, because I had the career numbers opening up, and when you look at the career numbers so far, you have Vladdy at 317, Juan Soto at 341, which is impressive, and Kevin Mayton at 341 as well. So he has three players kind of in that middle of the lineup that are, potentially going to be going towards that 500. Now, they're all 33 and 34, so I doubt that they are going to get there. They'd have to have some pretty good seasons, but we're going to see what happens with that. I then do think San Diego is going to finish second in the division. I actually was talking to Perez, and I am hoping I can convince him to come back. So San Diego, I'm going to be controlling and running it as I would anticipate he might do. So I will say for anyone here that is rebuilding that actually has a very good pitcher available, then San Diego would be interested in trading draft picks for high-end pitcher, not Detmers, but
Come on.
maybe an Emerson Isringhausen. But yeah, if you have some high-end players in a role that San Diego could use, I would definitely be interested for him because I do think that he has a pretty decent team. He actually built a really nice looking team the way that it's set up. Jackie Robinson at second base. Helton and McGriff looks to have dropped a little, but his numbers have been pretty good for them, and he's got some decent players in the minors. So, I think San Diego is a team that, just depending on free agency, also has a lot of money, but just didn't see the right type of players available in free agency. So, yeah, San Diego is going to finish second in that first wildcard spot. I then am probably going to say that San Francisco finishes third. Oh, no, sorry, they lost Blackman. I'll say the Angels finish third, and then San Francisco finishes last. It's interesting because High Heat won the division like 2 seasons ago, and the team looked pretty good, and he's had some bad luck in developing pitchers. Garrett Appier just kind of died. See, you guys think I pump up all the players all the time, and sometimes you just get moguled. So don't hate the Comish, hate the game. Stay in the league. But yeah, there's a lot of decent players on San Francisco, but I think he's in kind of that rebuild mode. A lot of his players seem to have kind of died out and fizzled. So I definitely see LA finishing ahead of them. Which then leads me to basically saying I have Atlanta, Cincinnati, St. Louis, San Diego, and the Dodgers all making the division. I think Philly's going to make a race just because I think that second division spot is going to be interesting. However, I will say this. If Raiders is trying to win, he's probably going to get the wild card over St. Louis. But it is what it is. We'll see how the season progresses, what type of trades get made. Because that really is what the big thing that always happens. You get that one injury, and we haven't had a lot since I changed injuries up, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it is kind of nice to see a few more injuries happen because before we were going Sims with like a 3-day injury, and that was it. Now we're starting to see a couple pieces go here and there. So, yeah.
It'll be interesting year this year, especially in the NL. Like I said, I have Atlanta with the top record, beating. I'm going to go with San Diego, and then I have the Dodgers beating Cincinnati, and then let's say, oh man, that's just a tough one. I'm going to go with Atlanta over the Dodgers to the World Series to plates Oakland. So I have Oakland and Atlanta in the World Series this year. With Oakland winning it.
All right, I didn't go as depth or as far depth as you in the AL, so I'm going to start with the NL and then flip back over to the AL. So I got Atlanta with the top record, beating San Diego, and unless San Diego can make some moves, then I have Cincinnati beating the Dodgers. Then in that rematch of Atlanta Cincinnati, I think that another year of growth with Atlanta allows them to beat Cincinnati. Um, and then you have Atlanta in the World Series. In the AL, you have Oakland winning the um, top record, so they will play the wild card team, being Texas, uh, because you're going to get eliminated in that wild card game. So Oakland beats Texas, no problem. I then am going to say that New York is able to squeeze it out against Cleveland, just because they have the starting pitching depth. Uh, I think this time around, Oakland beats New York. You have Oakland, Atlanta, and you know what? I'm going to say Oakland wins. Uh, they have a pretty good team. They added Blackman in the offseason, 45 mil. I mean, just they have so much money. They're projected to lose 2 mil again. Their payroll's 350 million. Uh, but they're going to be giving up like 100 million in the offseason. And if they go all the way to the World Series, they're probably going to be in debt by the end of it. And then you have Earl Alomar, who is at 4 years and 0 days arbitration. So in 2 years, you could have an Alomar in free agency, or Earl Valera in free agency, because he won't be able to afford him. So here's the thing: if you see Ren trying to trade pieces off for some cash, or to lower some um, payroll, if you don't help him out, then there is a chance that he loses some money, and all of a sudden you get some players, and then you take down the juggernaut. Because I will say, I know some people feel like it's probably a little unfair that he's got such a high payroll, especially when it's like 100 million over New York. But with big payroll comes big cash, and when you're making all that money, because of how I do it, all his players want more money in free agency or resignings, and then he loses all the money after. So it's really not that great to have all this extra cash when he's doing resignings, because some of his players go to free agency to be like a comp B. Like, I forget who he just put last year, but the guy wasn't worth comp B. It's just that the guy wanted 20 million because Ren had 300 million in cash. So it's much cheaper to sign him back for 8 mil and get a useful player than to have to, wait and sign him for even more. Now I really wish I knew who it was. I feel like it was the catcher, Booker, like 2 years ago. But like the guy wasn't worth 8 mil and he needed a catcher, so he just comped him. That's what some of the rich teams are going to do, and at some point it just kind of works out in the other team's favors, right? If you don't have the payroll, you don't have the crazy amount of cash. So that's my thing there. I'm just giving people tidbits on how to take down the Jolly Green Giant out there in Oakland.
That being said, Ren, when you listen to this podcast and you're like, oh my God, I should get rid of some of my money, you can send it to Boston. Boston will gladly take your cash. We don't mind. It's okay. Well, we will help you keep the league down. You're welcome. All right, so that is our World Series prediction. That is our division by division predictions. What else do we have to talk about tonight?
So, was there any big free agency move that you saw that was a huge steal for a team? I mean, obviously, the big free agency move of the season would have been, obviously, it has to be Blackman going to Oakland for 45 million, but he went to Oakland because Oakland can afford that. But I mean, Oakland also added Blake Townsend. But is there something that you were kind of, surprised that he went at that type of price?
Well, it's some of those things. So I'm just making sure that I'm reading my numbers right, and it looks like I'm not. So that is that. Well, okay. So here is one, for example. Cincinnati. Is that? Am I looking at the right year? Nope, not looking at the right year. There it is. All right. Problem solved. So, things. Explain why things were getting a little wonky for me there. But yeah, I generally go out in free agency every year and just bust a move and spend a lot of money because I can. Um, and I didn't do that this year because, again, I want to rebuild and nobody's helping me. But yeah, obviously the Danny Blackman signing for just that much money is just nuts. I mean, yeah, he's 29, but good God, 45 million a year, make it rain. The one pick that I didn't mind either. Again, another big contract. We'll see if it's worth it. But the Dodgers picking up the shortstop Mayton. I think that's anytime you can get a shortstop in free agency, even if they spend a ton of money, you do so. Again, Oakland, just Jesus Christ, the money that they spent this offseason is just nuts. I think that when you have it, you can spend it like that. Obviously, you're going to help yourself out a lot. I think that Oakland really helped themselves out quite a bit. And I think the Dodgers, again, two teams that I like the best out of everybody. I think they made good free agent moves, so I think that helps them a lot. I think what people missed out on is a guy like people want power, people want a bat. There was a dude out in free agency this year that has hit 100 home runs in the last 3 seasons, maybe a little bit more, while averaging well over 100 RBIs, and people just ignored him. And that is first baseman
Sakai.
Yeah. Listen. Granted, I'm a little bit biased because he's on my team, and I want to rebuild. For the love of God, let me rebuild. And so I released this dude in free agency because he hit 30 home runs, 36 doubles, 111 ribbies, 255, 778 ops last year. Like, those are good offensive numbers. Put him as a type B just so somebody would sign him, even though I thought those kind of productions is worth type A money. Type B, not a single bid. Barely anybody looked at him because he's 73 overall. Like, good people just don't. People just aren't thinking, and that's on them. There was plenty of good players that came back to me this year, which is why you got to be winning the wild card. I'm going to the wild card because people just don't get it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, when I look at free agency, another player that I'm surprised went so cheaply was Dustin May on the Dodgers. He's a pretty solid number 2, number 3 pitcher, and he's going to be the third or fourth pitcher on the Dodgers. But it's kind of crazy he went for $7.5 million. But we were kind of talking before this podcast happened, but from your team, I mean, Detmers is somebody that I thought, if you were a team that were trying to compete, he's not a bad player. Like, his low rating is power, so he doesn't strike people out. Who cares about strikeouts? I mean, I love strikeouts, and that's how I build my team. But sometimes you can have a decent team. But, no one should have signed Foreigner. I feel like he's the one person. Sakai, I mean, yeah, he's done pretty good. So, I mean, statistically, he's a pretty decent player. I definitely find that the first baseman in this file, people don't want to give a lot. Like an Austin Martin at third base, he wasn't doing too bad. And he might have been a decent player for a team pickup that ended up being returned. But yeah, definitely those two. I just don't understand, and I'll say it again. You have Anderson Espinoza from. Oh no, that was a good move by Toronto getting Espinoza from you. Probably ending up being traded in a year would be my guess with Manny's rebuild. But why is Freudis Nova heading back to Toronto? Just like Sakai, you could put him at first base if you really wanted to, and all of a sudden you have a first baseman that hits 48 home runs and can field. Nova is one of those players that if you were out there trying to add some pieces, he's the type of guy to go for. I don't know why anyone would pay comp for Nick Gonzalez. So as much as Toronto did one on Espinoza and did you a solid, I don't know why he took Gonzalez, but to each their own. Washington were just a bunch of random people that I signed to fill a roster, but yeah. And then Texas got Wisenhunt, which also is a pretty decent move. Not the best type of pitcher by any standard. and might get absolutely hammered in Texas, but he doesn't give up a lot of home runs, and maybe that's the reason. He's 87 command, and if he doesn't give up home runs in Texas, he could be a very good piece, and it's part of the reason. Like Texas does those little small additions throughout the year and kind of build something together. So it is nice to see some things falling in place here. I really kind of like how the files started to kind of mesh a little bit better. I don't think we're having a lot of the big problems going forward. Obviously, I still have to mess around with the draft. Otherwise, the draft is just garbage every year. But I think the potential in winter ball is going to help the league level out as well. Because sometimes you'll get that little extra bump. It might also cause some issues of super powerful people. So I do have to kind of keep that in mind as well. But yeah, overall, it was a very interesting free agency, and I think it's going to make way to a tighter race for those top teams and a real tight case for the elusive number one overall draft pick. I don't know who's going to be the number one draft pick next year. We'll see if any more baseball players die, but yeah, I maybe a Yogi Berra. That wouldn't be a bad way to be a number one pick next year. I know he's already dead, but we don't have a lot of catchers. So I did just add a couple more. I was trying to have in around about 20 players. I might try to put in some lower end guys, but I just added two relievers, a John Franco and a Bruce Sutterson. So two pretty solid relievers. I'm hoping they are people. Those are players being relievers that might end up kind of waiting till the second round. You never really know. But also because they're named, maybe not. But we'll kind of see where they go. They're not high overall, so they could. I think 55 overall and 53 overall with a 90 and 89 peak. So they're two players that could definitely just kind of change how things end up happening. And oh, I see there's a Toronto Philly trade live action right now, and it's not even worth talking about.
There it is. Those are the best ones. The ones not even worth talking about. So, yeah, I think the Vlad Jr. was the best trade that happened this offseason, and there wasn't many. So, listen, a lot of those guys you're talking about for agency, if Boston was trying to win this year, those are the guys I would have signed. I would have been all over them. Signing as many comp guys as I can just to bolster that team. But it's time for me to try to not win. So we'll see what happens there. If things go poorly, screw it. Maybe I'll just bulk up and do the world in the eventual championship. So I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I I do kind of want to get some people's input, so hopefully enough people read this. I would say one of the things that I was is had weird things with cash, where he had to give up so much cash. And I would say our league has a huge amount of cash. Um, and so we might do something with cash, and then you have to sign them to a contract so you don't get them at a minimal rate. But yeah, just kind of floating that out there. I want to see what people's inputs are. I know Stang is somebody that wasn't a huge fan of the um, one draft player that I made, even though it worked out for him. But I could also kind of do something like that where I give some information and you kind of see where it goes. So, yeah, I don't know whether you want to just talk about it next podcast or whether you have some instant thoughts there.
I say we leave that for next podcast because I have a couple ideas there that I'm gonna type up and send to you because I actually I have some interesting ideas there. So I will not mention them now. I will type them up and send them to you, and we could talk about it separately and then talk about it in the next podcast. But I definitely have some ideas there.
Sounds good.
So, all right. Well, again, guys, it's just the short season preview podcast for tonight. So we're going to leave it there. But next podcast, which will happen here in just a wee bit of time, will be your draft recap and your international free agent talk. Which we let's be fair, we might do two separate ones on that. Who knows? I do a lot of podcasts over the other league, and more than willing to do a number over here as well, because A, I don't mind doing them; they're fun, and B, most people tend to enjoy them. So, but that is it for tonight. So from all of us to all of you, have a pleasant day. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And again, there'll be a couple more coming up here shortly. So look out for them. Good night.